Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I am your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. Today we're going to talk about the Upanishads, and particularly with the Sanskrit, the Vedic language, really, everything has meaning on so many different levels. And looking at the Upanishads, which are beautiful. I'd like to take a look at them with an emphasis on, what it might be like to view the Upanishads from the perspective of a Brahman consciousness. When you go online, any Vedic literature, any of the stuff you read, I know that Panditji, the Pandit at the temple, he was even like, don't even bother with the internet when it comes to so much of that, because it's all so twisted and superficial and that. Of course, then again, there's some things there, and he certainly has agreed with this, that are great. But if you don't have the ability to discern, that you can get really misled by looking at all that stuff on the internet. So anyway, we'll take a look at the Upanishads, hopefully from a deeper level. And certainly all the things I say, even if I'm totally certain of it, I like to always have it supported, backed up by the fully trained Vedic pundits. A lot of people call themselves pundits, but fully trained Vedic pundits, there are only 1,000 in the world, and they're incredibly knowledgeable. And I go to them for, intellectual, academic knowledge of the Veda. Okay. So, geez, Scotty, watching the news lately, I mean, the world is just completely nuts,
Yeah.
And if people could just live and let live, it'd be a huge step forward, but they just can't do it, And we keep trying to find means for world peace. I mean, that's been going on for thousands of years throughout recorded history. And it's never worked. There are always wars and more wars and battles, and your allies one decade or your enemies the next, and then they become your allies again. And there's no solution except for one. And the way I put it in the past is clean the fishbowl. It's beautiful that the foundation of everything is divine. Everybody is divine. It's just that when the global consciousness gets polluted, compare that to like dirty water in the fishbowl, all the people are affected, some more than others, but all the people are affected. And it's the same thing. If you have a fishbowl and it's dirty, it affects all the fish. And so trying to get a healthy fishbowl without cleaning the fishbowl and the water in the fishbowl, it's just not going to work. And you'd think we would have figured that out long ago, but we just keep plugging away and trying to patch the whole thing up when the foundation is compromised because of global consciousness. So hopefully, and that right there, that's the theme of Mount Soma. There's a technology, it's in the Vedic literature, how to clean the global consciousness. It's called an enlightened city, and that's what we're doing. We're going to build an enlightened city. And it's right in the scripture. It's right there. And you have to understand, that the Veda isn't just a subjective thing. It's also objective. The science is there within the Veda. It's the knowledge of existence. And the thing is, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, before, really recorded history in the conventional sense, there were enlightened civilizations. The fishbowl was clean. And it takes a long time. It takes thousands of years, but slowly, by the time the fishbowl gets dirty, they've forgotten how to clean it because it's been fine for so long. It's still there in the scripture. It just became ignored, So anyway, this is a time when that's getting rejuvenated. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about they talk about the universe is ever expanding, and with the James Webb Telescope, there's a lot going on, and it's fun to look at it. But really, just to say it bluntly, the physicists are pretty much clueless, They come up with one theory one time and then another one, and they're throwing out all these theories. And, one physicist said that the whole thing is, the models are so complicated mathematically that you can make the universe look like anything you want just by tweaking the parameters a little bit. You want to make the universe look like a elephant, go ahead and tweak the parameters, and there it is. The universe looks like an elephant, and that's pretty much where physics is. But it was cognized in the Veda thousands of years ago, and by cleaning the windows of your own perception, you can see it for yourself. That's what's promised in the Veda, and that's what happens, So the universe, they talk about, in some debate, but it's an expanding universe, and it's constantly expanding. And so, the question becomes, well, if it's constantly expanding, is there really no limit to it? Does it just keep on going and going and going and going? Well, kind of, but not totally, because over huge periods of time, we're talking billions and billions of years, there's the creation of the universe, and then its dissolution. It goes back into the absolute. Everything cycles. The sun rises, the sun sets, and as I've said in previous podcasts, every syllable of the Veda, every letter, every varna, every Sanskrit letter, every Sanskrit word, there's the word or the letter, and then there's a gap, and then it goes to the next letter, and there's a sequential thing. And so that's a creation of a letter, and then it's dissolution back into the absolute, and then a creation in the next letter, and then a dissolution in the absolute. But now there's a momentum to it. It has a direction. It's kind of like, I don't know if this will help or not, but it's like if you have a formula for a graph and a line on the graph, that'll say the line goes like that. Well, there's a formula for that. What's that formula describing? You could say it's the momentum. It's the movement from one point to the next on the line, all called out based on the formula. You see, does that make sense, Scotty?
Yeah.
And so in the case of Vedic cognition, in the case of the sequentiality of the Veda, that's all comes from intent. Every verse of the Veda, there's a intent there, just like there's a formula that describes how the lines and the curves all go. There's an intent that determines the flow of a certain Vedic verse. And because you see what it's doing with every syllable, it goes all the way back into the unbounded fullness of Puran, the totality, infinite silence within the absolute, that source of infinite intelligence, that source of everything. So, you might ask the question, well, wait a minute, then if it just goes back to that, how does it know what's next? Why does A go to Ka or whatever? That's because of the momentum of the intent. There's a natural flow. So even though, and I described that a while ago, like with a flute. I talked about Krishna's flute as an example. But with the flute, in physics, they say that there's a pulsation, then it goes to a nodal point of stillness, then it goes to another pulsation as the sound vibrates down the flute. Same idea. Everything maps, So what happens in the manifestation of existence then is that, okay, we have this existence, and it's a field of great density. That's what matter is. Matter is just density. And over time, as the universe expands, it rarefies. Rarefies is kind of like it thins out. It becomes more and more ethereal, if you will. But not enough to be noticed because it takes so long, and because whatever level the consciousness is at, whatever the awareness is at, we could say, whatever level of rarefication we're functioning in, that's normal to us. It doesn't seem like, oh, wow, we're thin and out here, but what happens is it rarefies, it continues and continues to rarefy and becomes ever and ever finer, ever and ever thinner, if you will. And at some point, it just dissolves away, really. Where does it go to? It merges back into the absolute. The absolute is like Shiva, pure absolute, pure isness. And another, sometimes Shiva can be likened to space, pure space. The hollow of the throat is said to be Shiva, and that's the source out of which all the vowels and consonants of Sanskrit come from. It all emerges from no thingness, hollowness of the space in the throat, Shiva, and emerges out. And like that, when the universe dissolves, it goes back into that no thingness, that hollowness, that emptiness. Now, there is a momentum to the whole thing. It's like with the line in the formula, okay? There's a momentum to the whole thing. And so then what happens is it goes into that silence, but then that silence is lively. And it's like the depth of the ocean, but on the surface of the ocean, as it approaches the surface, it becomes, more and more lively, but it's still within the absolute silence of pure isness. But the idea is it starts to interact with itself. It's kind of like, if you ever, you dive into a swimming pool and all of a sudden, boom, it's really quiet, no noise. And as you come up to the surface, you can feel the difference between the very bottom of a deep swimming pool and the surface. It starts to kind of feel the churning of the water, but it's still totally silent. But then what happens at one moment when your head bobs out of the water, all of a sudden, particularly if you're in a public swimming pool or something, then sound emerges. But in the case of the manifestation of the absolute into the relative, that sound is the sound of that self-interacting dynamic as it emerges. It can be likened to, in the Upanishads, they talk about how the source of the whole tree is a hollow seed, the banyan seed, But what happens at some point, it cracks. It cracks open as the sprout begins to emerge. And like that, there's a cracking, if you want to say it that way, when the absolute source of total silence, place of total silence, emerges into sound. It cracks. And when it does that, now what we've got is we have went into the dissolution of the universe, and then it goes into complete silence. And then with that momentum, that intent is what it is. The momentum is really an intention. The creator had the intention to manifest, the universe. And so with that momentum, the self-interacting dynamic, and at some point, the self-interacting dynamic from A to Ga, and I've talked about that at length in previous podcasts, and then it goes to Ka. Ka is that cracking, that opening. And once that happens, then all of that dynamic just almost, I was going to use the word frenzy, but that's not right, but because it's so orderly, it's so systematic, but it's so dynamic, so lively, so powerful that boom, the universe emerges. And that's what the Big Bang is, by the way. And but see, it's all based on sound. It's all about the sound of the self-interacting dynamic when it goes from smriti. Smriti is memory within the absolute. It's the thing that keeps that momentum going in a direction. It's a memory. One where it is here is based on where it was there. There's a memory there, and the whole memory of the self-interacting dynamic keeps it lively. And then as it emerges, then sound. That's called shruti, sound. And that's the sound of all the fundamental building blocks that are foundational to all existence. And that's what Sanskrit is. It's the alphabet. The Sanskrit alphabet is basically if you will, a list of the fundamental building blocks of sound that form all of creation. And now, so now we can get into the thing. Well, what about well, we already kind of said this, but in Sanskrit, for example, the word for flower is pushpam, and so there's a sequentiality to pushpam, and there's an intention behind that within the absolute itself, pushpam, which created the word. And from that emerges the correlation between the name pushpam and the actual form, a flower. So that's how all that works. And physicists eventually, they'll figure it out. The place they got, well, one place they got confused is that they didn't really have a sense for the absolute, you know. So they tried to analyze it all from within the relative. But the foundation to it, the basis is within the absolute. But it's an interesting thing because deep inside, everybody knows everything. Deep inside. Why? Because we're one with everything. You are the totality. You are Brahman. And so we have a sense of it. And so be it a physicist or any other field of knowledge, we're sensing into that deeper knowledge. And physicists then are trying to figure out the structure and nature of the universe. And so they sense into it. And so they're sensing into really everything I just talked about. But they don't have the intellectual paradigm to accommodate what they're sensing. And so what they do is they try to take it and manifest it into the relative. And so so they come up with Big Bang theories, but their Big Bang theories aren't based on the deeper meaning of Big Bang. And so they're just doing like an echo of it, and they just come up with nonsense. And that's that much to many of their dismay. I mean, some of these physicists have been working on Big Bang theories their whole life. Harvard University physics department hangs its hat on Big Bang, but now with the telescope, it's not right, and so it's created a real mess for a lot of physicists in their lives, sadly enough. So at any rate, I've talked about that intelligence, almost like a glue, if you will. I don't know, but that source of order and coherence that is in the gaps between the syllables, between the letters of Sanskrit alphabet or the letters of a Vedic cognition, and that. And we've talked about that inner intelligence that's within the gaps, and that's the Brahmanas. And the Brahmanas include, the Upanishads are part of the Brahmanas, the Itihasas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Puranas, the Aranyakas, Smritis. Anyway, and they all have different qualities to them. Each of those is, unique unto themselves. And so the Upanishads are very popular. And one reason is that the Upanishads, you're kind of like, if you were to view the Brahmanas from the perspective of the relative, so to speak, if you could do that, what you would be doing is you'd be looking at the Upanishads. So in a sense, the Upanishads are sort of like a welcoming to consciousness as it exists, awareness as exists, human awareness, if you will. Is that making sense, Scotty?
Right.
Okay, good. So the Upanishads then are a beautiful thing, and they're a very valuable thing to just read the Upanishads. It helps culture the awareness, and it unfolds that deep knowledge of the truth of the absolute to our awareness. And so I thought I'd take a look at a few of the verses of the Upanishads, and then try to take a look at them from a deeper perspective. And there's one there are tons of them, and I'll just jump around and we'll find some that we want to talk about. I mean, there are so many, but one of Atmavarne Drishta Tavyaha, Shrota Tavyaha, mantavyaha, nididajasitavyaha. Okay. What that says is the Atma, okay, that the Atma, the one thing, the source, the soul, if you will, but the source of the soul, really. The Atma alone is it's the one thing that's really worthy of seeing, of hearing, of contemplating, and of realizing. Now, what does that really mean? I mean, on the one hand, we say, oh, yeah, okay, well, I can see the Atma, I'll read a book about it, and I can see that, or I can hear about it and listen to the chants and contemplate it, ponder it, and then eventually realize it and become enlightened or whatever. But what would that verse mean to somebody that was already there, already enlightened? And that's where you really do see it, hear it. And what does it mean to see it? To see it, I've talked about like Brahman consciousness in previous podcasts. You know, you look at your computer and that is the Atma. That's what seeing Atma is about. It's like you see it. That's what it is. You look at the pillow across the room. You look at anything. It is the Atma. And what about hearing? You see, that's a funny thing because you look at the computer and it's still just a computer, but it's also Atma simultaneously. And this might be a little hard for some people to even accept, but you can have that experience. That can happen just so naturally. But, you know, let's say you were brought up with a teaching of, you know, God, you know, that's, you know, some guy sitting on a cloud and whatever, and you just can't accept it. It just doesn't make any sense. And I think that's, in fact, what's going on in the world today to a great extent. A lot of people are rejecting religion because the understanding of religion and God and spirituality and all that was so superficial. It just, they couldn't buy it. It just seemed too ridiculous. And so what happens if then, and this does happen, what happens if then in that state, you look at the computer and all of a sudden that computer is the one thing that's the source of everything. It is that. And see, even that, it's hard to understand. I mean, what does that even mean, you know? But it's just the experience. And how can that be right? I am that, thou art that, all of this is nothing but that. That pillow is that. The computer is that. And so when you experience that, well, wait a minute, if you, let's say you didn't even believe in God because the presentation of God that was given to you was just didn't make any sense. What do you do with it then? You're looking at that pillow and that pillow is God, but you don't even believe in the God you were told about. It's not a simple, easy time. You don't just sit there and look at that. Oh, the pillow. Oh, okay. Now I get it. Now I get the new definition of God. Now I get God. Okay, great. I was wrong before, but now I see the light. No. It's not like that. You search for words. You struggle. That pillow is a messenger from God, but you don't even believe in God, but somehow messenger from God, somehow you can get away with that somehow, you know? And so that's from the perspective of a person who just entered Brahman consciousness, that's what that verse contemplating, you know? Because there needs to come an understanding. That's why they say, and they say that, and I still question this a little bit in a way, but not totally, but they say that the teacher is necessary to enter Brahman consciousness. And the idea is that there are two aspects to full knowledge, and pure knowledge means just awake too. And there are a couple of them. There's somebody's calling me. There's knowledge, just knowing, like what we think of as knowledge, kind of like an intellectual understanding, but that gets more and more subtle. But nevertheless, still it's an intellectual understanding. And then there's knowledge just based on direct experience. I am that pillow. That pillow is what? God? Well, I don't really believe in God. The person like, what is that? A messenger of God? Well, that's, what is it? And so then the knowledge, the teacher comes in and explains. And, okay. Now, okay, it makes sense. And so there's a value to knowledge. And I don't know. I mean, is it possible for somebody who enters that level of awareness to figure it out? Or does it really require a teacher? It said it requires a teacher. But then what is a teacher? Could the experience in that for long enough be a teacher? Could that be sufficient? I don't know. I don't know. But nevertheless, a real teacher at that moment who really sees what you're going through can make all the difference. It can explain your experience. Because one thing I'll say is that you can read all the books about enlightenment. You can read all the books about cosmic consciousness. You can read all the books about Brahman consciousness. But when you enter the state, it will be completely different. It's like, you can get a PhD in what strawberries taste like. But if you've never tasted one, you finally bit into one, you'd say, I'm a scholar, I know all about strawberries. That's not a strawberry. All right. So let's find, there's some great, and this is one of my favorite things to do. I just like to jump around. And find different verses of the Upanishads or Brahma Sutras, and then ponder them. What is that really about, and what's the deeper meaning of that? There's one I'm actually looking for it if I could find it, but it says that having something to the effect that the Creator, God, okay, having created the universe, then enters into it. And now that's a really interesting one from the perspective of Brahman consciousness. Because in Brahman consciousness, Brahmi Chetana, Brahman consciousness, the whole thing, all of relativity, this room, this universe, everything is just whatever you're looking at. It just looks like it's sort of like just lightly etched on the face of being, the totality. And I don't really know, but maybe different people would have a different name associated, because even though it's just pure consciousness, it's not an it. It's a he or a she, but it's not an it. Could even be both, I think. But what really works for me is, I always had it, it's like he who has no name, just pure consciousness, fully conscious of everything, the whole room, the whole universe, everything, without bias, without opinion, without intervention. And all of this is just lightly etched upon the face of that unbounded totality of pure isness. So it's like the relative, even though it's very dense, is virtual. It's like a virtual image. You with me, Scotty?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So, but now what about this thing where the creator, having created the universe, enters into it? Well, at the same time that you have that experience, that pillow is the creator, that pillow is God, that pillow also is pure isness, the one thing that's the source of everything. And how can that be the one thing that's the source of everything, whereas this computer is the one thing that's the source of everything? Well, I think the best I can do to help with that is, there was a Riemann mathematician, and he said, if you have a circle and there's no points inside the circle, the only points in existence are just on the perimeter of the circle itself. Where's the center of that circle? And mathematically, they say that every point is equally the center. And it's kind of like that. So in Brahman consciousness, you realize that you are that Atma. You are that one thing that's the source of everything. Your object of perception, that pillow, is the one thing that's the source of everything. And so the creator has entered into the whole field of relativity. And then there's the process. Like, you're here and you're observing that pillow over there. And there's a whole process of observation. And so in the case of that he who has no name, he's just a silent observer, observing the whole universe. And that process of observation is called the Devata value. Now, in the case of the universe, it's all the different laws of nature that involve the mechanics of observation. It's called the Devata value. And based on the Devata value and its relationship with the Rishi, the seer, a Chundas value emerges. And the Chundas value is largely a function of, it's called hiding. And so different values, because different values emerge to different degrees, different qualities. And the qualities of pillowness are what emerge to define the pillow. But nevertheless, at the same time, the full, it's all rooted in the full value of the totality value. So it's all right there. So you could say all the gods dwell within that pillow. That's a valid statement. And so then you can look at the pillow. Is this making sense, Scotty?
Yeah.
Oh, good. You're looking at the pillow, and there's then a wholeness value. It's called samahita value. There's a wholeness value. You take it as a whole. All of those values, all taken together as a whole. And that wholeness value has a personified correlate. Everything does. All the devatas, everything. And that wholeness value then is what's called Indra, the king of the gods. All the gods are contained within that, or like that. But now there's another quality called the Vishnu quality. Vishnu, so how does Vishnu differ from Indra? Because see, all the gods are contained within Vishnu. But the difference is that with respect to Indra is, the focus is on the wholeness, the samhita component. So Indra is everywhere. Everything has a samhita value, and that's Indra. Okay. But with respect to Vishnu, the whole inner, lively, dynamic, all taken together of all the laws of nature, i.e., all the devatas, all the gods, all of that taken together, that's all contained within the value of Vishnu. And so where does all this come from, though? It comes from he who has no name. It comes from infinite silence, no thingness, the Shiva value. And then it interacts with itself and creates this field of multiplicity where all the devas dwell, and it emerges into relativity. And Vishnu then includes all of that, you see? So that's why they should, Hari Hara, Shiva Ram, Vishnu adores Shiva, worships Shiva. Shiva's the source of the whole thing. Shiva adores Vishnu, worships Vishnu, because Vishnu is the whole ball of wax, the whole totality of the whole thing. But you see, I think if the more you get into having an understanding of that dynamic and how it all works, the more and more beautiful it becomes,
No,
Another beautiful Upanishad, Matri Devo Bhava Patri Dev, honor thy father as God, honor thy mother as God, honor the teacher as God, honor the guest as God. And now this is a very interesting one. I mean, on the one surface, okay, in that night, okay, great, okay, we get that, okay, let's do that, and then we'll be good. But let's take a deeper look at it here. It's not easy for a lot of people, most people perhaps, to really recognize the profundity and the depth of the connection a person has with their mother. Because particularly in Kali Yuga, relationships with parents can be terrible, all confused and a mess. And I think all kids go through the thing where sooner or later, at some stage of their life, in a temper tantrum or whatever, they, oh, I hate you, blah, blah, and all that. But the thing is, there's a deep connection there, irrefutable, unavoidable, non-compromising, though it can be ignored, denied, overridden to some extent, just better shrouded, but never really overridden. And that's, in one sense, never negated. And that is that there's that sense, that connection. The mother is God, father is God. And if you even think about your school teachers, I mean, I had some teachers that I loved, and I had some teachers in high school. I remember one that I just really didn't like. But nevertheless, to this day, you look back, and if you can just get over your issues or whatever with the person, there's a connection just with the acharya, with the teacher, with that value that is divine, And same thing with a guest in your home, So this isn't just, this isn't just a simple, okay, here's a rule for you to follow. It's much, much more, Well, here's another beautiful one. From where speech returns, that is my divine abode, my ultimate abode, my supreme abode. That was from, I think it's you find these things in different places, but it was in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna said that to Arjuna. And it's a beautiful, because from where speech returns, you might say, well, isn't that where speech comes from? The absolute. Krishna is embodiment of the absolute. And yeah, you could say that, but I think even more profoundly, it's from where it returns. Everything gravitates back, every syllable, every life, everything returns back to the ocean of being. And that's what he's talking about here. You will get enlightened eventually. You have no choice. Every drop of water, no matter how high the mountaintop that it falls on in the rain, eventually returns to the ocean. That's just the nature of existence. It's a beautiful, beautiful, really relationship to have. Here's another one. I think it's very common saying in India. Satyam Vijayate, it means truth alone triumphs. Now, on one level, we can be pretty simplistic, and it's like, the guy on the white shining horse with the silver bullets always wins. But that, of course, isn't what this is saying. But ultimately, it's another way of saying that everything returns to the ocean of being. Everything is naturally gravitating in that direction. So as particularly in Kali Yuga, this age of ignorance and oblivion, as messed up as things might be, there is a natural force bringing things back to wholeness, bringing things back to oneness, bringing things back to truth. And truth there, I mean, it's a deepest meaning of truth. It's not about facts. It's about divine truth. What is truth, really? Truth is the absolute, the truth of the absolute, that source of infinite harmony, infinite perfection, Another one, know that the knowing by which the knowing of which, through which the knowing of which everything is known. I've used the analogy before, like in mathematics. You learn how to add and say numbers. That doesn't mean you memorize the all possible combination. It means you're at home with the source of the knowledge of mathematics of addition. And you just know that. You can feel it in your body. You are the knower of the truth of mathematics. And like that, when you know the Atma, when you know the absolute, then you are the knower of truth, and you are the knower of the source of all knowledge. And that's a very real experience. It doesn't mean that somebody could say to you, well, how many elephants are there in Africa? And you can say, oh, okay, there are this many elephants in Africa. But nevertheless, just because you're a great mathematician doesn't mean if somebody walks up to you and says, how much is 10,789,502 billion, whatever, times 65 zillion, you don't rattle out the number. But nevertheless, you're at home with that knowledge. Are we good, Scotty? I'm hearing a ding there.
Yeah, no, it's just notifications. Thanks.
Okay, all right, good. So it's like that. Let's find some of these. I just love these. And this is what I do. One of my favorite things is to get up in the middle of the night. I usually get up around 1:30 and read the Veda, read Sanskrit. Pragyanam Brahma. Pragyanam. Pragya is like the divine cosmic intellect. And in the state of Brahman consciousness, that you realize that whole, you see, it's not like there's that other one, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, or Aham Vishvam, I am the universe. But better said, my universe is myself. And there's a huge difference there. Because with my universe, and that's your experience in Brahman consciousness, this is all just a projection of my own consciousness. It's all an expression of the Atma. It's all an expression of myself. It's my universe. And we're not talking about a narcissistic trip here. We're talking about perception of how existence is structured. Every point on the circle is the center. So 10 people in Brahman consciousness would all have the same experience, and it wouldn't be a contradiction. It wouldn't be like, no, it's my universe. No, it's my universe. No, but it's just this, my universe. Tat tamasi, thou art that. It's not saying, okay, go ahead and evolve yourself so you can feel that. It's like, I see it. Thou art that. All of this is that. And it's my universe. I am the source of everything. It can, and see how easy it is to get messed up with this whole thing. Because I mean, you could really get lost into a pretty crazy ego trip if it wasn't really understood, Yeah. Another one, it's very popular one. That is full, this is full. From fullness comes out. Taking fullness from fullness, what remains is fullness. What is that all about? Well, first, even, this is full, that is full. That is full, this is full. Right off the bat, what is that and what is this? Well, in Brahman consciousness, this means Brahman. And that means the whole field of illusion and Maya. And they're both full. And one comes from out of the other. And like it says in the Brahma Sutras, did the multiplicity, is that the source of the Atman, or is the Atman the source of multiplicity? And either way, one is derived from the other. There's no difference. It's all cognition, But in the manifestation of existence, you could say from fullness comes. Because it's from the self, all of this emerges. So there's, profound beauty and depth to all of this. All of this is just so phenomenal, Am I making sense here, Scotty?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it's well, I guess since we're the expression of this Brahman consciousness, or we've manifested into this world, it's our birthright to be able to, I guess we are blessed being born in this form where we can actually refine our physiology so we can experience the totality, but it's like almost like we're looking at it from outside in instead of coming at it from, we need to be coming from the depth of our being, the source of all.
Yeah, and the thing is that the experience is so different. In the field, when you're functioning of, by, for, through, however you want to say it, the field of relativity, then it's, the mind is king, and the mind and heart, and how you feel, how you think, and it's all kind of like that fullness is your domain, But when you're within the absolute itself, when you're functioning from that place, it's a very, very different experience. And I've compared it in the past. It's like if you have a sock and it's inside out, you take it and you turn it right side out, and it's the same exact sock, but it's totally different. And so what we're trying to do here really, and what the Upanishads can really help with, is it can help people start to bridge that gap. Kind of become freed from the bondage of limited perspective.
Well, that's why none of these physics explanations will ever be able to totally explain this whole thing, because they're looking at it from a perspective, not
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it
Yeah,
just
that's a good point. That's a
as
good
long
point.
as
That's exactly what we just said the
right,
state of ignorance is, you know.
right, yeah,
Yeah. So
they're
they're trying to
collapsing it
explain
down.
something from within the domain of the relative, but the explanation lies within the absolute.
Yeah, you can't explain the absolute from the language of the relative. You can,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
it's
right.
on right.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's right. Yeah.
Well,
There's a
that's why all
yeah,
these people are everybody's going crazy, is because they're holding on to their perspective. Their desire is being to, like whoever it is, Palestinians, the Israelis, the
yeah.
Russians, whoever, they have their perspective, which they're white knuckling onto
Yeah, the
that.
notion of wholeness is way too small. The notion of
Right,
wholeness is, if everybody thought the way I did, then the world would be fine.
right,
And so that's how we create wholeness. And it's never going to work.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bondage kind of thing, or
It's a
bondage.
bondage. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. There's a
yeah.
beautiful expression, very often quoted. Um, I think if I think, as I recall, it introduces the Upanishads of the Krishna Yajurveda. It's very commonly quoted. Let us be together. Let us eat together. Let us be vital together. Uh, Let us radiate the truth, radiate the light of life together. Never denounce anyone, never entertain negativity. It speaks so much of the power of group coherence. But when you look at the world, people have a hard time doing that, don't they?
Yeah. Well, it's like what you were talking about earlier with all the different, Vishnu, Shiva, all the different gods.
Hmm.
There's somebody from a Catholic perspective or some other religious perspective that would maybe shut off hearing what you said, but you can also say it in that language, and that God has different facets to him that embody these mechanics.
Yeah, and then based on a person's religious orientation, they cling to one and say all the others are wrong, and this one is the right one.
No, well, what I'm saying though about
Yeah.
that is that, like you were talking about Shiva. Shiva is the creator of everything,
Mm,
right?
mm.
Vishnu
You
is
could
the
say that. He's
totality.
the source. Yeah.
Okay, well, you could say God is the creator. God is the totality. God is, you know, those are just different facets of God, so that they can hear it. So
Yeah, they do all that. Yeah.
right,
Yeah. But see, it's all one wholeness.
right. That's what
But
I'm
what
saying.
we do is we take a look at the different parts, even though there's no such thing as a part. It's all one. But you take a look at the different parts to explore the nature of the wholeness.
Right.
But the idea is that there's a principle. I think it's called the Meissner effect. I'm not sure, but you know how if you have a plastic band around the lid of a jar of pickles, and how hard it is to get that plastic band off so you can get to the pickles. But if you just take a knife and put one little slit, one little crack in the band, the whole thing just peels right off. And so what it's saying here is the power of unity, the power of maintaining that group coherence. Let us be together. And eat together doesn't necessarily mean, literally sit down at a table and all eat together every day. But it's in our activities, in our life's endeavors, whatever they may be, let's remain together. And if we can do that, I mean, imagine, you use Palestinian and the Israeli thing. If people could just do that, what a different world it would be. Can't we just eat together, be together, radiate life together? It's so simple, but it's so profoundly valid, cosmically valid, Never denounce anyone. See, now that, and so here's the thing about that. Everybody, one time or another, gets upset with somebody and says something harsh or something bad about them or to them. And so what does it mean then? Never denounce anybody? Are we given a charge that's impossible? No, that's not what it means, really. But it means that in spite of those dynamics, you never allow those to overshadow. And we do our best to never denounce anyone, but things are going to happen. But the point is that we never allow ourselves, or we always check ourselves as best we can to get to the point where even if those things are done, even if those things are said, you don't judge a person by the worst thing they've ever done, and so regardless of how improper anything is done, you see that at the depth of that person is Brahman, the absolute, Chaitanya, divinity. And so you have those two dynamics functioning at the same time. Here's the surface level, and you have to do things to manage people on the surface level, especially if they misbehave. But it's not at the expense of, or the compromise of, being awake to the underlying basis of divinity. And so in an absolute sense, you never denounce anybody, you don't entertain negativity like that. But the world doesn't do that. The world we do the opposite. We judge people by the worst thing they've ever done, the worst way they've ever hurt us, and that defines them in our mind. And we hold to that, and we live our life and our relationship with them based upon that. And so, they talk about forgiving and forgetting. Well, yeah, forgive, but don't forget. To forget would be stupid, because you got to know if there's a pattern there. So we're not talking about oblivion here, but we're talking about forgiveness in the sense that you don't allow, no matter how horrible it is or whatever, you always have to be able to see that place of divinity that is the true essence of everything in the universe. It all comes out of Brahman and all returns back to Brahman. All right, I guess that's it for today. Anything else, Scotty?
No, that was a lot.
Okay. Okay, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we will talk with you again next week.